Thank you, Jonathan. So now we've had some context of different types of technology assessment. We're going to talk about how the stage gate design tool can be used to help aid that. So as you can see on the screen at the moment, there are the main features of the stage gate design tool. And the first one we're going to focus on is the activity checklist. So bearing in mind that the stage gate design tool is there to help guide the technology development process. And one of the main ways it does that, and one of the first steps of using the stage gate design tool, is where the user can tick off which technology development activities they have done in their process so far. And these can cover a whole range of things. So they're split up into evaluation areas. So these are like reliability and power capture, installability. And we have a list of these 10 evaluation areas. And within each one, there are certain activities which have to be completed, which are to make you eligible for a stage gate assessment. These activities can be seen per evaluation area in the tool, or they can also be seen per activity category. So it's just different ways of looking at the same information to help the user tick off what they have done and haven't done. So for example, this could be things like you've completed your open water testing at a particular scale, or you've completed some numerical modelling to a certain level of accuracy. So in this sense, the user gets to use the stage gate design tool without thinking too much about their technology readiness level or where they might lie in other scales, and they just say if they have or haven't done a certain activity. And these are done with a series of checkboxes. And so the point of this activity is that the user can then see which stage gate they're eligible to be assessed against. But alongside that, it also helps the user to use the rest of the suite of tools in the DTOceanPlus suite of tools. And that's because depending on what the user has and hasn't done in their technology development process, they can then use different complexity levels of the other tools in DTOceanPlus. And that essentially means different versions of the tools, and it means they'll have the right information to do that. So it's a way of guiding the user into the right stage gate assessment, and it's also a way of guiding the user in how to use the rest of the tools. So I'll pass you on to my colleague Ben, who'll give you a demonstration of the activity checklist, how the user ticks off different activities and how that guides them in which stage gate assessment to complete.
Thanks, Jillian. So here we have the stage gate tool. Hopefully you can see it. I think you can. So this is a pre-prepared study that I've made earlier. And as Jillian's just outlined, we're going to show the first feature, which is the activity checklist. So if we go into the activity checklist, you will see along the top the 6 stages from stage 0 all the way up to stage 5. And then there's this main explorer component in the middle, the white box, which is what shows all the activities. So the user can click through each of the stages to see the various activities that comprise each stage. And also, so we go back to stage 0. So these are called the activity categories down the left-hand side here. So for instance, if the user clicks, I want to see what are the activities in the concept category, and then they get a further breakdown of the 6 activities that make up this activity category. And again, they can expand each of the individual activities to get more details on each one. So, for example, device concept definition in the very first stage, stage 0. And there's further details here about the exact details that we're looking for this particular activity. And alongside each activity, there's the checkbox that Jillian mentioned. So the user, if they've actually completed this activity, they can mark it as complete. And if we scroll down a bit, you'll see a live progress bars down at the bottom, which just shows you how much of each stage you've completed. There is also the ability to categorize by evaluation areas, as Jillian described. So if we click this switch up here, then you get the same activities, but they're just categorized by this defined set of evaluation areas, so acceptability, installability, etc. So again, these are the same activities, and you can, so this is the one we ticked earlier, and it's also ticked here. So it's just a different categorization. So if we go back to activity category, another functionality is if you say, oh, I've done all of these 6 activities, I've done loads of work on the concept, then you can mark the entire category as complete. And as you're ticking boxes off, you'll see the progress bar updating. And then also, if you know for sure, maybe you're in stage 2, so you've completed stage 0 and stage 1, there's also the option to mark entire stages as complete. So we mark stage 0 as complete, and we can mark stage 1 as complete, for example. You'll see the update. If we go into stage 2, just to finish off this example, let's just assume that the applicant or the technology developer has completed all the numerical modeling, for instance. So that goes up to 21%. So at any point, the user can save the results and come back to it. So they might use the checklist to see what they need to do next, go off and do it, and then come back and mark it as complete when they've gone and done it. Yeah, so that's the input page of the checklist. If we then go onto the results page by clicking the results, and once it's loaded, so we see this is the summary data that was shown in the progress bar, again, just in slightly different format. And really crucially, it also recommends, okay, you've completed everything up to stage 1. So this means you're eligible to be assessed against stage gate 1 to 2 between these 2 stages. You can get a further breakdown of each of the individual stages by clicking into them. So for instance, stage 2, it shows that you've done all your numerical modeling, but nothing else for your activity categories. And for your evaluation areas, you get the current breakdown. So showing you're 50% complete for power capture and power conversion, for example. And then finally, at the bottom, you have the list of outstanding activities. So if, in that example I mentioned earlier, if they go off and start to do some of their numerical modeling, for instance, and they complete that, they can come back to this tab to see what they've left to do. And I think that's it, and I'll go back and I'll hand over to Jonathan. Oh, sorry, there was one more thing that I needed to say. Down at the bottom of this main results page, and Jillian has touched on this already, but if you, because we've assessed that or identified that the user has reached stage 1 and eligible to be assessed against stage gate 1 to 2, there is a mapping in the background that enables the user to get a feel for which complexity level is appropriate to run the deployment and assessment tools. So if I jump tabs here, I'm in the stage gate module, which is this tab, and I'm just going to jump to the main DTOcean GUI, which will look something like this. You'll see a list of the deployment and assessment tools here. And this is where you create entities for each module. So for example, if you're creating a new energy capture entity, you click create here and get asked for the project complexity, which is a drop down of 1, 2, 3. So one of the uses of StageGate in an integrated mode is to run the checklist to get this list of suggested complexity levels. So the idea being you could have this open in one tab and make your way through each of the modules, knowing which is the recommended complexity level based on what activities you've completed. So I'll close that for now. Yeah, and I will hand over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Ben. So as I said, I'm gonna pop up and try to bring in a bit of real life application and with a real life example of the tools that Ben's demonstrating, and some of the benefits that they should bring to the sector. At the last point, then Ben showed the StageGate tool effectively as a way into the use of the rest of the suite of tools of DTOceanPlus to know which level of complexity of the deployment and assessment tools we should use. But at a wider level, I think one of the main uses of the StageGate tool is to provide guidance. And in that regard, it's very important that it links in, as I mentioned before, with the framework for ocean energy technology evaluation from OES. And here's an example of why. I always like to use the example of Core Power Ocean, the wave energy converter technology developer. They started their early stage technology development in Sweden, and then a few years ago applied to come into Scotland to take part in the Wave Energy Scotland Power Takeoff call. Now that call at the time had 3 separate stages, which were reflective of the stages that Ben's been showing you. And it was possible for Core Power to apply to enter any one of those 3 stages. Now it's really important, both for Core Power and the funder, that they enter the right stage. And there's in the past been a tendency for some technology developers to try and move too quickly through those stages. So we want to make sure that technology developers, for their own benefit and for efficiency of funding, get into the right stage. So there's real benefit in being able to use DTOceanPlus to see the recommended content of the stages, to see the recommendations of what analysis and what assessment should be carried out at the different stages, and indeed what data should be presented at each of the stages. And that aligns the expectations between a technology developer and a funder, so that they know what stage of the technology development they're ready for. And that continues into the next steps of Core Power development. Since completing stage 3 of the WES Power Takeoff call, they've now moved to array deployment in Portugal and funding in Portugal, and onwards in the future to commercial scale arrays. There's real benefit in international uptake of the framework of recommendations and the demonstration of that framework through DTOceanPlus, so that all of these funders have the same expectation of the technology development path as Core Power or any other internationally mobile technology developer, so that we all know what engineering activities are expected, at what scale, what information should be provided. And we have this common thread of assessment which DTOceanPlus provides, so that the technology can be assessed in the same way. And I think that's a real benefit of the guidance function of the stage gate design tool.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, as well as the consistency in assessment, it also just gives transparency in what a user has completed, or what a technology developer has completed on their journey so far. So even if, like you say, through these different countries, they were to use different systems to assess technologies, the checklist that we've talked through would show you very clearly what they have and haven't completed, to give that nice transparency. So thank you.
Yeah, and Ben mentioned, Ben showed clicking on a button which completed one of the stages immediately. That's a really useful function for expediency of moving through. But it's really important to go through all the stages to just receive that guidance of, oh, is there something I've missed in stage 1, which may or may not be applicable to my technology development process, but is something that the funder is expecting me to have done. So to be able to provide the narrative of how your development path has slightly differed from that internationally agreed one is a benefit of the StageGate tool as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a good example of that is perhaps at the beginning, in the early stages, people focus mostly on power capture and cost, and maybe things like the acceptability or the environmental impact don't come into later. But with the StageGate design tool or the activity checklist, there's certain things to think about even at those earliest stages, to keep that consistency. Okay, so thank you. So that was our first feature we talked through, being the activity checklist, and we're going to go on now to show you, once the activity checklist is complete, it's then time to do a StageGate assessment.